Chapter 2: Secrets of Credit Repair and Dispel Common Credit Myths. The next thing that we'd like to look at is how we can fix our credit scores. There are tons of myths and bad advice out there that keep you from reaching your goals of doing well with your credit and keeping it in check for a better score. That is why we must primarily look at the best ways to repair your credit and then explore many of the common credit myths you likely believe are holding you back today. Secrets of credit repair. Your credit history is the main reason your score remains stuck at a particular number. While working on credit, most people make the mistake of shutting down credit lines or remove new debt to assist them. This is often the wrong thing to do. Once you lose accounts, or some latest ones, it will take your credit age down. The credit age is based on the typical age of all your accounts. If you've got a few on your list of higher age and push one or two that are just a couple of months old, your score will go down. Try to get that credit history up there and don't open up any new accounts and see what a difference it can make. Look at the available credit. One question that tons of individuals have while working on their credit is whether opening up a new line of credit or a new MasterCard would help them out. However, if you already have some credit going and you feel stretched, this is often not the best action. The rationale for this is usually that you never want to finish up using all of the credit that's available. This is often an enormous mistake that will send tons of red flags to credit agencies everywhere. It is better to understand when an excess amount is just too much and work with what you have for now. Secured credit. Secured credit is something that tons of individuals try out now. It's a new method to assist our customers who want to spice up their scores and don't have any credit to start with or handle poor credit. If you'd wish to see a lift in your score and think that you can handle the credit, then take a glance at the secured MasterCard. This process is exactly like an open-end credit. However, it would still be going to have the function of a MasterCard. You have to make payments every month, a bit like a MasterCard, and then the credit agency will be ready to see that you simply are performing on building or repairing your credit in the process. Dispute. One of the neatest things you can do to make your credit score go up is to dispute accurate things on the credit report. Sometimes the report that's out there for you will reflect some falsities that will harm your credit score. While it's going to take a while and won't be easy, it's worthwhile in assisting you in getting that score up. The mistakes. If you're in the process of realizing that you've got to repair your credit quite a bit, it's also time to understand that you should not make any mistakes while working on your credit. Once you've dug that big hole, it's best to prevent any more shoveling and find out how to remain on the surface as much as possible. It means you should not attempt to remove any credit lines, make payments on time, and always check your report back to confirm whether it is on the higher side. Pay down your debt. Let's have a detailed view of this method. The more you pay your debt, the higher the credit. It is often not a simple process, as you'll need to give things up and rein in on your spending. The rewards are going to be worthwhile in the end. Following this will help you detect the budget or debt payment method you want to exercise. And as you create more of these payments along the way, you get things done on time and you're careful about getting your debt paid, your score will go up. Use credit sparingly. Having an enormous balance on a single card or even on all of them will harm your credit score. In such a case, it won't matter if you pay your monthly bills on time. That bloated balance will hurt your score. The portion of the credit extended to you and the amount utilized by you will be sent to the various credit bureaus, and it would make an enormous difference in your score. The more you'll get the debt paid down, the higher. Use the pairing. If you have a new credit card or are running into issues getting any credit and need help to create things up, you'll want to look at the choice of becoming a licensed user on the MasterCard. The MasterCard would like to clarify if you wish to create the license account in your name or spouse or any other loved one of yours. Keep in mind that this is quite a high-risk strategy. You would have to devise an open system and a genuine reason for the first cardholder to add you to the present account truly. If they don't pay their bills on time, it will harm you, and you have to pay off everything also. Otherwise, you get them in trouble. Pay things often. To help you get the best credit score possible, you need to work with as little of the credit available to you as possible. If you're ready to keep your credit utilization below 30%, although 10% is best, then you'll raise your score. If you've got a coffee credit allowance like $500, then it will be even harder to manage this. One way to make sure that you are ready to use the cardboard but not harm your utilization rate in the least is to make at least one payment in a billing cycle. You don't need to pay after each transaction if you don't want to, but if you're doing it daily, you'll confirm your utilization stays at the proper spot. Strategically open accounts. While you ought not to go all out and open up many accounts once you've decided to enhance your credit score, you'd want to go about it strategically and handle these accounts in a way that is safe and streamlined. Applying for credit should be done sparingly because these applications end up in strict inquiry on your report, and if they're recent, they will take a couple of points off. If you work with low credit limits and your spending reduction isn't necessary, you may look forward to opening up a new account or two to assist you in possessing more credit. But remember that you shouldn't increase your spending beyond what you're already able to afford. Common credit myths. There are tons of myths out there outlining how you can improve your credit. Watching out for these myths and ensuring that you don't fall prey to any of them will be critical if you want to accelerate your scores and get the best leads. Some of the most common myths out there that we'd like for you to be careful about include: pre-employment screens use credit scores. This is a common issue that worries all. Some people have bad credit, and they need to get a job to work on it. Then they're told that they won't be ready to get jobs because their credit score is just too low. However, credit scores aren't and have never been used by employers for job-related purposes. Employers do not have access to your credit scores. However, credit reports, which is a little different from credit scores, are often used for employment by screening purposes, but they only happen if you allow them access. You should open up your balances to get a better score. Spreading out your balances on credit cards through a single card can harm your credit scores. Remember that tons of the models, including the FICO and Vantage score, will work with tons of things to calculate these overall scores. The second most important metric is debt load, or the quantity and sort of debt. The fewer accounts you have with a balance, the higher is your credit score. If you've got a MasterCard that doesn't carry a balance, it will impact your credit score positively. It is often because those cards will have a debt to limit the ratio of 0%. The worth of your age will be lost when a card is closed. Closing a MasterCard account won't result in losing out on the worth of how long you've had the card. Credit scoring models are still going to consider the age of accounts that have been closed once they find out your credit score for as long as that's still on the credit report. A number of these will still age once they are closed. It is possible that closing this card will impact the score because it takes away the quantity of credit that you have. It is often worse because it messes with some ratios if you continue to balance those out, but it's not going to mess with the age of the account. These scores are only rewarding us for debt. Credit scores will reward customers who don't have tons of debt, and people who have zero MasterCard debt will be awarded the most. The assumption that you need to carry tons of debt to possess good scores is a false idea and is practiced by those who do not understand these scores. Once you ruin your credit, you'll never rebuild it. A credit report is more of a history of your credit, and if you give it enough time, credit is something that could be rebuilt. It generally shows us how things are right at a particular point in time and keeps an extended record of all credit that the individual consumer will open in their name. It will show us the inactive and closed accounts, but the history is retained irrespective of anything. Late or missed payments can often reflect in a report for up to 7 years in many cases, but it's still possible to go through and rebuild credit. You've got to take the time to pay all of your debts on time, search for some better options for credit, and learn more about credit and how money works. Additionally, the longer the credit history can maintain limited negative information, the higher it is. If you do have some negative on your credit score, the older it is, the smaller it becomes. Checking your report will harm your score. If a consumer takes the time to access their report, it's not going to affect their score in the least. It will only be a soft pull and will show alongside a private credit report, but won't mess with your score. You may take a glance at your credit report as often as you wish to confirm that it's accurate, up to date, and there's no missing information. When someone applies for credit, though, the lender takes out the applicant's credit report, which may end up being a tough inquiry. The report may be shown to another lender who wants to look at your report because they will show new debt that doesn't yet show abreast of the credit report. These will affect your credit scores. Suppose you have too many of those on a report. In that case, it means that you are applying for too much credit directly and that you are being rejected for a few reasons, which is a bad sign. Closing credit card accounts enhances your score. It is true that paying off debt and not keeping a balance on your credit card fetches you a good credit score. But you should not get carried away and decide to close all your credit card accounts altogether, as it may hurt your credit score. Creditors like to see whether you are responsible enough to pay your debts, so it is advisable to keep 1 or 2 credit card lines open. You can look for credit cards that do not charge an annual fee and pay off your balances every month in a religious manner. If you want to close an account, close the newest one. Your income and assets impact your credit score. After all those years of struggle and living from paycheck to paycheck, you finally get your dream job with a high salary. Do you think your credit score will shoot up as a result of your new job? Think again. Credit bureaus don't consider your personal assets or income while establishing your credit score. However, individual lenders do consider your income before giving you a loan. Their confidence in your high salary and repayment history would bring in more attractive offers from different lenders. You should not check your credit score because you have bad credit. As I have already mentioned before, You should check your credit score at least once a year. But some people skip this step thinking they have bad credit. However, you should check your score even if your score is bad. Credit bureaus often make mistakes, and you might be penalized for a problem or dispute that belongs to someone else. You can remove any such item from your report by addressing the issue to the credit bureau. Bankruptcy protection will be excellent for those who have large amount of debt. We have to understand that bankruptcy is a legal process that will relieve an individual from paying their debts. Depending on the sort of bankruptcy, a person could also be in a situation where he or she is unable to pay off any of the debt, and at other times they'll be willing to repay part of it. However, this is not a great free card. It will be something that shows abreast of your report for 10 years in some cases and may make it almost impossible for you to get credit. Consumers should only opt for it if they're absolutely out of options, and they must consider working with credit counseling, as it will give them a better shot at repaying the debts and keep things in check. In some cases, one can settle debt for fewer than the first amount and save credit once he or she gets into trouble. The Fair Credit Reporting Act oversees how lenders and borrowers connect with the credit bureaus. Bad credit is eliminated from your report only after 7 years. However, if you have filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, then a bad credit will drop off your report after 10 years. Your credit report is a reflection of your financial state, and you cannot eliminate any item from your report unless it is inaccurate. If you happen to come across any inaccuracies in the items on your report, you must write a letter highlighting the error and have it corrected right away. You can't get a hold of a MasterCard if you haven't already earned credit. Take a glance around at university campus, and you'll see that this is often untrue. Students who leave their homes primarily have limited liabilities regarding credit and hence do not have any credit card score. Even they are ready to get a MasterCard. It is true that for you to at least possess a FICO score, you would like to make sure that your credit report features at least one account that is active for at least 6 months and one account reported to the credit bureau in the past 6 months. If you don't meet these two requirements, you will not have anything there for the FICO score to be created. That makes it harder to get a MasterCard, but not impossible. Everyone has to start somewhere concerning their credit scores. So, you could utilize a couple of options to get started. For instance, you may begin with a secured MasterCard, a card with a coffee limit primarily. Then you may become a licensed user on an account that belongs to somebody else, or you can get a co-signer on a MasterCard with you. All of these options will make it possible for you to get the number of credits you want, albeit you're just beginning and you don't have anything on the report. Unlike some other options, it requires you to take a couple of complicated steps to ensure that you have some activity on your credit report. These steps will assist you in getting started. Not using credit cards will harm your score. Despite this misconception, avoiding your MasterCard altogether isn't going to help improve your credit score either. Sure, if you have an automobile loan and the mortgage and you have an excellent payment history, you'll undergo and have a good score without having to figure out a MasterCard in the lease. However, if you opt to avoid these credit cards entirely, there are some ways in which this will harm you. First, about 1/10 of your score will return from your credit mix. The score will increase once you have several sorts of credit accounts in the future. Also, about 30% of your score comes from owned amounts, which can include your credit utilization ratio or the quantity of the credit that's available to you. It may not sound sort of a big deal, but if you do not have any open credit lines, this category will be non-existent, and this is a massive part of your credit score that you are just neglecting. Without it, it's tough to boost your credit score. If you're married, you've got only one score. Another common misconception that we like to talk about is that you can have only one combined credit score if you're married. You won't be treated as only one person for credit scoring and a few of the opposite financial purposes. Depending on your situation, this might be helpful or an enormous disadvantage. For example, if one spouse doesn't have a good credit score, but the opposite partner has an excellent credit history, the latter would be eligible to apply for loans and credit cards independently. He or she might be able to do that without having to think about the opposite spouse. On the contrary, for the purchases that will need both spouses' income, such as a mortgage, both spouses' credit will be considered. In such a case, the sole exception is that one among the spouses can afford the mortgage just on their income. Credit scores aren't going to change all that always. There are tons of individuals who believe that their scores are only getting updated at set intervals, maybe just once a month or a couple of times a year. However, your credit score may be updated on a day-to-day basis if there is some new information being added to your credit report. At fast glance at your FICO score can help you ascertain that your score may change many times. Even with a slight change in the balance, you pay or owe one of your cards. It's impossible to get a perfect credit score. In only a couple of chapters, we will show that it's possible to go through and have a perfect credit score. The FICO credit scoring model possesses scores that will range from 300 to 850. The ideal credit score is 850, and while this type of score is pretty rare, with only about 1% of consumers having it, this doesn't mean that it is unattainable. In addition, we should also understand that there's no magic formula that's going to conjure up and make you reach that ideal credit score. You need to know how the FICO scoring system works, then be smart and use some sense while working with your credit. We tend to think about many things when it's time to take care of our credit and be sure that it will behave in the manner we would like. When it's time to extend our scores, we must acknowledge what will drag the score down, what's going to pull the score up, and the common myths that will hold us back. Having this data makes it a lot easier to make sure you'll get what you like without making your progress go backwards in the process.